Hello, everyone. Welcome to Being Patient Live Talks. I'm Mark New, reporter at Being Patient. Today, we have a guest who's going to share with us some important insight on the diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's and also her work with the Latino community to shed light on the disease. Her name is Myra Garcia, and she has a unique background with many talents, which she also shares with many people at a senior care memory center. Myra, welcome to our live talk. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh my gosh, I'm just so grateful to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And first, tell us about your background, and let's go back to you as a child and the passion that you've always had.
Well, I'm the daughter of Cuban immigrants. This was the first, I guess it was like the first group of people coming over from Cuba to the US. My sister was born in Cuba, but I was born in the US. And in fact, I was born on the 4th of July. And I always thought that that was a really great birthday. And so anyway, um, from there, and my parents did not speak any English. But fortunately, it wasn't just my parents, but it was my aunts and uncles. They all came over to the US, and we had this really beautiful, huge family all together, very close, living very close to each other, and just having wonderful things, just wonderful food and just enjoying each other, going to church together. It was just a lovely place to be.
And singing was a big part of your life as a child, right?
Well, yes, my mother and her sisters, they all sang. So I know it's kind of funny, but um, I thought that everybody could sing. So I didn't think that it was anything special. I started piano lessons at 7. And then my music teacher in high school, she was testing everybody to make sure that they could be a part of the group. And when it was my turn, she said, from that moment on, she was going to be my voice teacher and my piano teacher. That doesn't happen very often, if at all. I mean, it was an amazing experience. And it was funny because, again, everybody in my family could sing. So I didn't think it was anything special. So I learned that it was actually something quite special.
That played a big part in your childhood, as did language too, right?
Oh, yes, totally. And so I so obviously Spanish was my first language, then English. I remember one time, there was a time when many people were coming from Cuba into the US. And I was in 4th grade at the time. And it was, uh, for whatever reason, I was chosen by my teachers that I would be the navigator for all of those people coming in. And so I had to speak to them in Spanish and then in English. And it was interesting. It was such an honor to do that, but I didn't see it that way. At that point in time, I said, why me? There's so many other Cubans here. Why me? And, of course, now I understand that perhaps I had, perhaps some gift that I could help those folks. And so
And you speak
that
more languages too, right? You speak more languages too, is that right?
well, yes, because then when I went to college, I majored in voice. And of course, I had to study all of the languages. So I studied, of course, Spanish was first, then French, then German, and then Italian. And that was my life. And I had a musical education, and had opportunities to perform
And then,
throughout the country.
so you performed throughout the country, and also you embarked on another career too, and you got very successful at the University of La Verne in California, right? Tell me about that.
Yes. And so I realized that I needed to do something different. I found schoolwork to be very, very enjoyable. I was called to be the the person who takes care of the donors, and helping to do all sorts of things like that. And so I went from one location to another, as I was going deeper and deeper into this experience. And what was really, really just absolutely lovely was all of those opportunities that I had to sing and perform and still work. And so that was always very, very just lovely, and something I enjoyed tremendously.
So it's during this time at the University of La Verne when you're working as a vice president, you're handling, it sounds like a lot of important financial decisions, and you're singing too. And then where do you start to notice when things don't seem quite right?
Yeah, it was about maybe the second second year, I think, when I was at the University of La Verne.
And you're how old at this time? At that
Oh,
time, you're what age?
well, um, I have trouble with numbers, so I can't tell you exactly, but I was probably in my early 40s, perhaps. Um, and this was a really great experience because I had had the opportunity to work with the person who became the president of the University of La Verne, and we were colleagues, and so that was terrific. And so the first couple of years went really well. Then things started to go a little bit south. Um, I was having trouble with numbers, with remembering people's names, that kind of thing. And when um, when COVID came, I lost my opportunities to be at that organization at all. I was let go, and so fortunately, well, didn't work out too well. I went to San Diego Symphony Orchestra, and I was hired as a vice president as well. But that only lasted about 3 months. Then I had to resign because I just couldn't do the work.
So tell us about what's, you're having difficulties with what at that time? You're starting to notice what?
Well, I'm noticing that I've been given tasks, and that it becomes very, very difficult. One of the tasks would be doing some manual work on, like right now I'm having trouble with this word. What is the word? It's about just working in a group like that, and it was a wonderful organization, but I was having difficulty with that. And when I realized again this was not going to work, then I resigned. I never wanted to have been just let go. And so I just left the job. And
Was using technology becoming.
technology was so difficult. And it continues to be difficult for me. But it was particularly difficult because, it was COVID time. And so, everything was just so different. So that was very, very, it was painful. Because then I went to another location. I went to a community care organization, and I was the vice president there as well. And again, that lasted, maybe three weeks, something like that. And I had to resign because I couldn't do the work.
So did you know that something was not right? And then did you seek help then? Tell us the first step there.
Yeah. And so when I was at the university, I knew something was right, but I thought it was, Alzheimer's disease. But I went to doctors many, many times, and they all said, you are fine. There was one doctor who did a whole bunch of testing. And at the end of the day, she says, what you have is ADD. And when I was told ADD, I will tell you, I burst into tears of joy because I knew it was not Alzheimer's. And so I was on those drugs for a number of years. And then that's when COVID came along.
So taking those drugs, they had little effect. Is that right?
Exactly. Those drugs, it seemed like it was working fine, but ultimately it really wasn't. And then after COVID, when COVID was on, that's when I went to my neuropsychiatrist. It took me, I looked after so many doctors, and they kept giving me just very, very simple questions, very, very simple questions. And I could do those. So because I could do those, then they would say, oh, you're fine. Go away.
Like which questions were they asking you to answer?
Well, they're simple tests. So it might be a numbers test, or, drawing a picture, or, just very, very simple things like that. And so, I could do those. I was still driving. I was doing a whole bunch of stuff. So it wasn't until COVID that once again, that's when I went to San Diego, and I realized, oh my gosh, this is not working. And I found a neuropsychiatrist, and that was the beginning of my new me.
Did the neuropsychiatrist give you different tests, or how did they know?
Yes.
Did they think pretty quickly early on that they knew what was wrong?
Well, she did not know what was wrong at the beginning, but we did 8 hours of testing in one day. So that was really something. I mean, it was very difficult. There were many things that I couldn't do, that I couldn't figure out. And so it was after that testing process, I was told that I had early stage Alzheimer's disease. And I was encouraged to go to so the neuropsychiatrist encouraged me to get into a clinical trial. And that's when I went to USC.
And tell us about some of that testing, and we'll get on to the trial. But curious to what are some of the things that you're being put through in that 8 hours? And there are probably some you do well and some you don't. But what are the ones that you notice you're having trouble with?
Like she might have a picture of different animals, but the colors are different. And so, it might be an elephant or it might be a giraffe. And, you're supposed to say, what kind of animal is this? What's the name of this animal? And because it's kind of like a trick, right? Because then you would have different colors, and sometimes it's different dots and all sorts of stuff like that. And so I just bombed it, totally bombed it. It was terrible. It was terrible. She sent me during that time. She sent me. It was lunchtime, so she said, "Here, go to this part of that same place. Go there, and then when you're finished with lunch, come back, and we'll continue." And I didn't pick up on the "and then come back." So I sat there waiting for my neurologist to come and look for me. She had to come look for me because I didn't understand what she had asked me to do. So,
Is it right away then on the day of the testing that you find out, and tell me your thoughts and what's going through your mind when you are diagnosed and told by her?
Right. So after we did all of that testing, then she said, "Okay, let's meet again in the next few weeks." So because she wanted to really get really into the weeds, if you will. So she said, "And come back with your husband." So we went to see her, and then that's when she gave me the diagnosis, and of course the idea that I should be getting into a clinical trial.
And when you hear that diagnosis, tell me what's going through your mind.
Oh, I was thrilled. I mean, other people might be, because I was expecting it. I had been expecting this, starting from my aunts to all of the crazy things that were happening in my life. So it just felt, it was like such a burden had been released, because I knew something was wrong. All of my doctors said I was fine. So finally, I had the diagnosis that I had been expecting for a long time. So it was just wonderful.
Okay. And you talked about how then you quickly, very soon, you begin an actual clinical trial, or tell me about that.
Yeah. So she suggested a couple of locations, and I went to USC. And the very first thing was that I had to have some cognitive testing right there. And so when I went to the psychiatrist, she was the one who was going to, give a little bit of testing. So she did give some little testing, and then she realized, okay, this person needs our help. And then that's when she told me, my husband was there with me. She told us about the clinical trial and whether I was interested. And I said, absolutely, 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 put me on it. And, and so they did some further testing, and then I was accepted into this clinical trial. And I have been on those drugs for all of those years until just now. I have now finished my time there.
And it's donanemab, which was the clinical trial. And at the time, you weren't even told whether you had a placebo or not, right? And then
that's correct. And they didn't even know it. So, it's like, it's really, really.
You found out that you
yes,
indeed.
because they themselves didn't know whether I had the placebo or the drug. So even the clinicians didn't know. And they're.
But you find out that you're getting it later. that
Yes.
you
Oh,
had?
just recently.
Oh,
Yeah.
just recently. Okay.
Yeah, just recently. It was maybe a month ago, something ago like that, month or 2 months ago. And that's when you know, well, I learned that I had the drug about halfway through the plan. So I'm misspoke, about halfway through the plan, and then I continued to get infusions.
All right. Fascinating. Let's talk now about your background too, because you had some really interesting things to talk about, being part of the Cuban community and your relatives too, which
Yeah.
you now look back and know that many of them had it too. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's right. And it's, I'm just so grateful that my mother did not have it. My mother's two sisters had it. Uh, and so I guess that was the first inkling that I had about this disease. And I didn't dwell on it or anything like that. I was busy with my music life and enjoying that and traveling across the country and performing in so many different fabulous venues.
But you saw that your relatives were never diagnosed, or tell us about that.
No, they really weren't. It was my one of my aunts, so the aunt that I spoke about who had the difficulty at her home. Um, she didn't get the care that she needed, but my other aunt, um, she mentioned, not she, but her daughter mentioned that there was something called Alzheimer's. And that was the very first moment that I learned about that disease, about this disease.
And tell us, they're in Cuba. Your mother's sisters, right? They're in Cuba, right?
Well, they were already in the US by that time.
Okay. But tell us the story of your aunt, and she lost her house. Is that right?
Oh, yes, yes. So my older aunt, she was living with her her daughter and grandchildren and all of that. So she was in good hands. But my other aunt um, lived alone. She was a widow. She lived alone with my cousin, who is a special needs person. And, you know, that's a terrible connection because neither one of them understood what it meant to be in a condo. And so they stopped paying their association fees. They stopped bathing. Everything was a mess in their home. And I was just visiting because I was on a work trip, and I went over here to Miami, and it was horrendous. And they finally went to well, my cousin went to a special needs location, but my aunt then was taken care of by her mother.
And it's because you talked about it before we actually started this live stream, so I want to tell our watchers, you went to visit her, and she actually missed a payment because of her Alzheimer's, which wasn't diagnosed, or clarify that for me. What happened?
Well, she had not she hadn't she didn't know what was going on. She just knew that things were not right. Um, or maybe she didn't even know that. So they were, uh, if her husband had been there, he would have been able to take care of all of those things, but he had passed by that time. And so neither my aunt nor my cousin really understood what was going on. And it was a really, really sad situation to have all of your possessions thrown down on the street. It was just horrendous.
Now it's because she missed a homeowners association payment, correct?
Well, I don't know how many she had missed, but I guess it was that was as much as they could take. And then at that point, they said, "That's it, you're out."
Okay. And this highlights something too, as you've done a lot of work for organizations in how the minority communities really don't have as much attention paid to this disease. Tell me about that and what you know.
Right. Well, the story of my aunts, I think, is why I feel this way. They were wonderful, wonderful women, and just joyful and fun to be with, and then to see them just get worse and worse and worse as time goes on. It was scary. It was very scary. And so I'm sure that it's because of my two aunts that I had it always in the back of my head that eventually I might have that.
And tell me about the work you're doing with the community and through singing.
Well, I sing in several choirs, which I enjoy very, very much. As I mentioned, music is what I majored in college, and had the opportunity to perform in Avery Fisher Hall in New York. We went on tour. I was with the Spanish Repertory Theater of New York for many years. We traveled the whole country. I traveled in so many places, and having leading roles. So it was just so much fun. So much.
And you're using your singing now to help others with Alzheimer's.
That's right. That's
Tell
right.
me about that.
And oh my gosh, that is so much fun. I sing in several choirs. So my church choir, and then there's a continuing care organization nearby. And I'm in that choir as well. But part of it is that there is people with cognitive cognitive problems. They are they don't remember me from week to week, and I go every week and we sing together. And what I learned, I thought that they might want some opera or some, Spanish music or different kinds of things like that. And they didn't connect with that. But then I said, well, how about some kids' songs? And we started with a bunch of children's songs, and they love it. And they find it just fun. And they laugh. They know it's silly that it's children's songs, but they know all the words. And so it breaks my heart, that these folks have to deal with this. But at the same time, it's wonderful that they enjoy the music, as I do. And so, I think the power of music really is very, very, it is something that is essential in my life, and I hope in many other people's lives, the power of music.
And tell me about your advocacy within the Latino community in particular, and how they talk about Alzheimer's.
I'm very active, as I mentioned, with the Alzheimer's Association. And from time to time, I have an opportunity to speak in Spanish. And and they're always very, very grateful because, you know, they're struggling too. And this odd disease that is here, and it's hurting the country, and hurting all these folks. I mean, there's so many people with this disease in the world, and so you know, I really appreciate being able to speak in Spanish to folks. I had an opportunity to go to a place back in New York area, and give a talk in Spanish. And, you know, so things like that really mean a lot to me because that is part of my heritage. And I know that a lot of folks don't necessarily know about this disease. And so I try to help people understand what it's all about.
Is it a subject in the community that's somewhat taboo sometimes to talk about, or is it just there's just not enough knowledge that is spread there and enough people talking about it? Tell me.
Well, you know, I mentioned earlier that my GP, or maybe I didn't mention this, but my GP and several GPs because I knew something was not right. And they either didn't understand the disease, they didn't want to accept it because I can speak, I can drive, et cetera, et cetera. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happens to many, many other Latino people who they're just seen as, you know, just face value, and they don't understand necessarily what is going on in the brain.
Okay. And you also, with your language skills, I'm curious, being able to speak 5 languages, has that been impacted by Alzheimer's, or are you still able to converse in all those languages?
Well, I studied many languages, but I'm really fluent, obviously English, Spanish, and French. So those are the 3 that I use the most. And I just enjoy it a lot. And whenever there's an opportunity to speak in Spanish or to sing in Spanish, you know, I love that. Oh, and my church choir, we go on national tours, and so not national, international tours, and so the next one will be in Spain. So I'm very, very happy about that.
Myra, thank you so much for joining us. It's been really valuable to hear your story in dealing with a disease that is life-changing for so many. We know your experience and will certainly help and inspire others. And thanks to our community for tuning in. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter on beingpatient.com, where we'll keep you up to date on all the upcoming talks. See you next time.
Thank you very much.